What happens when entitlement meets the law? Today's story takes us to a small-town McDonald's, where one woman learned the hard way that rules apply to everyone. It all started on a bright afternoon when Evelyn Clark stormed into the restaurant, skipping the long line and demanding immediate service. With her graying blonde hair pulled back tightly and an expression that looked like she had been chewing on lemons all morning, she slapped her hand on the counter, insisting she be served first. But Rye, the young cashier with a friendly yet firm attitude, refused to break the rules. He politely asked her to wait her turn, but Evelyn wasn't having it. Her voice rose, her words became sharper, and soon, all eyes in the restaurant were on her. Customers pulled out their phones, recording as she hurled insults at Rye, pushing the situation to a boiling point. That's when Officer Melvin Nobles arrived, a seasoned cop with years of experience handling difficult people. He calmly approached, asking Evelyn to step aside and let things proceed peacefully. But instead of listening, Evelyn did the unthinkable. She slapped the officer across the face. The entire restaurant gasped. In that moment, everything changed. What started as a tantrum at a fast food counter was about to turn into a courtroom battle. Stay tuned to see how justice was served. It was a bright afternoon at Big Eats McDonald's, and the place was buzzing with energy. Customers lined up, eager for their orders, while the staff worked swiftly behind the counter. Rye, a young cashier with nearly 2 years of experience, handled the rush with his usual patience and a friendly smile. He greeted customers, took orders, and kept the line moving efficiently. Everything seemed like a typical busy day, until Evelyn Clark walked in. With a scowl on her face and an air of self-importance, Evelyn didn't even glance at the long line of people waiting ahead of her. Instead, she marched straight to the counter, slamming her hand down. "Hey, I'm ready to order," she barked, completely ignoring the customers who had been waiting. Rye, who was in the middle of helping a mother with 2 small children, looked up and remained calm. "Ma'am, please wait in line. I'll be with you as soon as I finish with the other customers," he said politely, gesturing toward the queue. But Evelyn wasn't interested in waiting. Her eyes narrowed, and her lips curled in frustration. "Excuse me? Do you know who I am?" she demanded, as if her name alone should grant her immediate service. Rye, unfazed, kept his polite but firm tone. "I understand, ma'am, but we serve everyone in order. Please be patient." That was the last thing Evelyn wanted to hear. Her face flushed red with anger as she scoffed loudly. "Maybe if you weren't so busy wasting time, you'd actually get people served faster," she snapped. The hostility in her voice made nearby customers glance up from their meals, sensing trouble brewing. Then, under her breath but loud enough for Rye to hear, she muttered something rude and personal. The words stung, but Rye held his composure. He had dealt with difficult customers before. By now, the entire restaurant was aware of what was happening. A few people in line whispered among themselves, while others pulled out their phones to record. They had seen rude customers before, but Evelyn was something else entirely. Her voice grew louder, her insults sharper, and the tension in the restaurant thickened. What had started as simple impatience was quickly turning into a full-blown scene, and the worst was yet to come. Just as the tension in the restaurant reached its peak, the front doors swung open, and in walked Officer Melvin Nobles. A seasoned cop with years of experience, he carried himself with calm authority, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. The whispers of the crowd quieted as he approached the counter, taking in the furious woman standing inches away from a visibly uncomfortable Rye. He had seen plenty of public disputes before, but something about Evelyn's stance told him she wasn't going to back down easily. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down," Officer Nobles said, his voice firm yet composed. "The staff will serve you as soon as it's your turn, but you cannot disrupt the restaurant like this." He held up a hand, signaling for peace, but Evelyn wasn't interested in listening. She turned to him with an indignant glare, crossing her arms tightly. "Oh, great! Now you're telling me what to do too?" she snapped. "I don't need anyone, especially you, telling me when I can order my food." Officer Nobles didn't flinch. "Ma'am, I'm asking you to step aside so the staff can continue serving customers. Let's handle this the easy way." His tone was steady, but Evelyn's defiance only grew stronger. "The easy way?" she scoffed. "No one tells me what to do. Not this kid behind the counter, and certainly not some cop." She stepped forward, her body tense, her face twisted with rage. The restaurant was silent now. People watched with wide eyes, phones still recording, unsure of what would happen next. Then, in a single shocking moment, Evelyn lashed out. With a swift, angry motion, she raised her hand and slapped Officer Nobles hard across the face. A collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. The slap echoed in the air, and time seemed to stand still. Customers gaped in disbelief, their phones capturing the exact moment Evelyn crossed the line from entitled to criminal. Officer Nobles' expression shifted, no longer just calm, but serious. He had been patient, given her every chance to back down. But now, she had left him no choice. Evelyn Clark had just made the worst mistake of her life. The restaurant remained frozen in stunned silence. Officer Nobles slowly turned back to Evelyn, his jaw tightening. He had handled countless difficult people before. But this was different. This wasn't just a rude customer causing a scene. This was assault. He took a steady breath, keeping his voice firm but controlled. "Ma'am, that was assault on a police officer," he said. "I'm giving you one last warning. Step back and calm down, or I will have to take further action." But Evelyn was beyond reasoning. Instead of backing down, she doubled down, her face twisting with fury. "Oh, you think you're so tough?" she sneered. "You can't touch me. I'll sue you. I'll sue this whole place." Her voice was shrill, filled with anger and desperation. Then, in one last act of defiance, she tried to push past him, shoving at his chest in an attempt to make her way back to the counter. But her anger blinded her to reality. As she lunged forward, Officer Nobles stepped aside, and Evelyn's momentum betrayed her. She stumbled, her feet slipping beneath her, and with a sharp gasp, she lost her balance. The entire restaurant watched as she fell backward, her arms flailing before she hit the floor with a heavy thud. A groan escaped her lips as she clutched her side, the sudden impact knocking the wind out of her. For a moment, no one moved. Then Rye, ever the professional, quickly reached for the phone and called 911. "We need paramedics at Big Eats," he told the operator. "A woman just fell, and she might be hurt." Within minutes, the distant sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as an ambulance pulled up outside. Paramedics rushed in, guiding customers back to give them space. They carefully lifted Evelyn onto a stretcher, checking her vitals as she slowly regained full consciousness. Even as they wheeled her out, her anger remained. She glared at Officer Nobles, her expression filled with cold fury. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. But Officer Nobles simply watched her go, his face unreadable. Around the restaurant, customers murmured among themselves, shaking their heads in disbelief. Some whispered about how justice had been served, while others scrolled through their phones, already sharing the footage of what they had just witnessed. One thing was certain. Evelyn Clark had just become a lesson in what happens when entitlement meets reality. 2 weeks later, Evelyn Clark walked into the courthouse with her head held high, a bandage wrapped around her wrist, and a determined scowl on her face. She had followed through on her threat, suing Officer Nobles for excessive force, convinced that justice was on her side. In her mind, she was the victim, the helpless woman who had been unfairly attacked by a police officer in a fast food restaurant. With her lawyer by her side, she fully expected to win, certain that the court would see things her way. As the trial began, Evelyn's attorney painted a dramatic picture. He spoke passionately about how Officer Nobles had violently pushed his client, causing her to suffer injuries and humiliation. Evelyn nodded along, playing the part of the wronged woman, occasionally casting smug glances in the officer's direction. But Officer Nobles remained calm. He knew the truth, and more importantly, he knew the evidence would speak for itself. When it was time for the defense, Nobles' attorney wasted no time presenting the key piece of evidence, the video recordings taken by multiple customers at Big Eats. The courtroom fell silent as the footage played from different angles, showing Evelyn's behavior in full detail. The entitled outburst, the insults toward Rye, the slap across Officer Nobles' face, and finally, her attempt to push past him before stumbling on her own. The judge watched closely, his expression unreadable. As the last video ended, Evelyn's confidence drained from her face. What had started as smug satisfaction quickly turned into pale, wide-eyed shock. She opened her mouth to argue, but there was nothing to say. The truth was undeniable. The judge adjusted his glasses and spoke firmly. Based on the overwhelming video evidence, it is clear that Officer Nobles acted in self-defense. This case is dismissed. A murmur spread through the courtroom as reporters scribbled notes and locals whispered among themselves. Evelyn sat frozen for a moment, then clenched her jaw and stormed out of the courtroom, her face burning with humiliation. Meanwhile, Officer Nobles stood, straightened his uniform, and walked out with his head held high. Justice had been served, and the town wouldn't soon forget the day entitlement met its match in the face of the law. This case proves a simple but powerful lesson. Entitlement doesn't win against the truth. Evelyn Clark believed she could bully her way to special treatment, but in the end, the evidence spoke louder than her accusations. Thanks to technology, multiple witnesses, and the patience of Officer Nobles, justice prevailed. This story is a reminder that no one is above the rules, no matter how loudly they demand to be. What do you think about this incident? Have you ever witnessed entitlement like this in real life? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.